Bambi is like no other Disney film you've seen before. The horror novelist Stephen King described it as the first movie that has ever scared him. It was indeed one of those films where Disney, oddly enough, didn't hesitate to depict, or at least allude to, gruesome and tragic events. It's a movie that is often claimed to traumatize children, or make many of its viewers cry. Interestingly though, that's not the reason why Bambi stands out. You would think a film that achieved this kind of emotional impact did so with an engaging traditional story, but that's not really the case. What impresses me more than the dark tones of the movie is its lack of a conventional narrative structure. I think Bambi was as close as Disney has ever been to experimentation. It's a movie with no distinctive plot, with a rising action, climax, and resolution. Instead, it focuses more on the atmosphere and the visuals. It feels more like a series of vignettes that serve to paint a picture rather than tell a story with a normal pace. The only thing that shifts throughout the movie is a tone that goes back and forth between happy and extremely dark places. And all of this compels me to ask the question, why? What was Disney trying to do with this film, and what did it want to say? As a whole, Bambi feels like a representation of nature, as the movie spends most of its time giving us a close look on life in the forest, from the bigger picture to the most mundane elements. It feels almost like a documentary, picturing to us the life of animals in their natural habitat with little to no intervention from the outside world, to showcase what the cycle of life in nature is like. We know that's something that Disney has explored, mainly through The Lion King, which has its fair share of themes that explore nature and the cycle of life. But make no mistake, Bambi is way different than The Lion King. The latter is, like most Disney stories, focused on a character, which is Simba, who is depicted as a hero that goes on a transformative journey where he faces some challenges, overcomes a conflict, and learns a lesson by the end and grows as a character. It's a story that has clear-cut plot devices that drive it, whereas Bambi doesn't have a central character, but rather nature itself, or the forest if you want, is a character of its own. And while yes, Bambi is one character that we look at more particularly, he's still just a sample, one single part of an entire system. The movie is not bothered by his personal journey, so to speak. We don't see him go on an adventure or a quest and face conflicts to grow and visibly change by the end. I mean, sure, Bambi has developed as a character, he's not the same between the beginning and the end of the movie. That's not something that we're supposed to fixate on. It's not the center of the story, and in that, it deviates from the usual narrative formula of Disney movies. That's why Bambi is defined more by its atmosphere. One of its captivating aspects is the animation. You can tell there was an aim to make it look as realistic as possible, and so unlike other Disney movies, there is not a single touch of magic in it. But even without that magic, it still establishes a utopic picture of its setting. For a good portion of the movie, what we see in front of us is a happy life. It's so clear from the expressions of joy by the animals, all the fun they have, the colors and the songs. It almost goes to show that nature can be wonderful and magical on its own without any need for supernatural elements. But that image does not stay the same forever. At some point, Bambi contrasts the beautiful utopic picture that was painted with heavy and dark imagery. It is one of those rare instances where we see death depicted directly. See, after building that colorful and peaceful image, the movie starts to distort it by infusing elements of conflict which are represented by humans. We learn that men are the biggest threat to the forest, and more specifically to the animals, since they get actively hunted by them. That force of conflict gets to its peak when Bambi's mother gets murdered in what is arguably the most tragic scene in the movie. It hits that hard particularly because of how the film spends so much time maintaining a cheerful atmosphere, and so that shift in tone makes it powerful. And if you think the way the death scene was handled is dark enough, it would be interesting to note that originally that scene was even more graphic, as it showed the mother getting shot on screen with a visible wound. But that detail was changed because of how gruesome and unsettling it would have been for children to watch. What we get from this scene though is that nature, when left on its own, is almost perfect. All of its elements can coexist in harmony until that harmony is disrupted by an external force, which is humans. So we can initially read the film as a highlight of the damage human beings single-handedly cause in nature, and with that it all gains an environmentalist dimension. Now, while that death scene was chilling to the point where you can imagine the theater getting suddenly silent over it, it strangely transitions back to where we left off in terms of setting and tone. We jump forward to see Bambi as a fully grown deer that has already moved on from that traumatizing event, and all life is finally back to normal. Everyone is happy, life is beautiful, and we get this same colorful image we've had from the start. The movie continues with that same tune. We constantly go back and forth between the cheerful atmosphere and then gruesome depictions of catastrophes. We see another depiction of death when a bird is shot, and then the atmosphere gets even more intense with the forest getting consumed by fire. Finally, the threats that our characters face escalate into what seems to be irreversible damage, the point of no return. And yet, we somehow always end up defaulting back to the same rosy image that was established from the very beginning, which makes me wonder and doubt whether Bambi was really concerned by a portrayal of tragedy at all. In the end, our characters survive and overcome all of the hardships they have been through. They make their own families, and now we get to see new faces that have not yet encountered the horrors of life. We're back to singing and dancing despite it all. That's what the cycle of life looks like. If we pay attention to what they're singing by the end, we hear them saying, "Love is a song that never ends." And this could be a hint that points to the movie's core message, which is that nature in a way is divine and eternal, that it will always find a way to survive no matter what it goes through. And this changes the view we would have on the movie at first glance. I started this video by saying that Bambi is not like any other Disney film we've seen before, yet by the end I think it's somewhat exactly that, just like every other Disney movie. We may not have a distinctive character that goes through a transformative journey, but here we have nature that goes through just that. If we think of nature as a character, it was the one that went through challenges and learned by the end how to be resilient. It is indeed like every other movie in the way that it ends on a happy, hopeful note where the protagonist wins. With that being said though, I still might stretch things a little and stick to my reading of it as a subtly dark story. What the ending of this movie implies is that even the most gruesome bits in this story, meaning the actions that are actively committed by humans to cause harm, are also a part of the natural order of things. At first, it looked like the film tried to call out humans' destructive behaviors as something that goes against that very order, that disrupts something that is at its core whole and perfect if left alone. But I think that this idea isn't fully committed to by the end of the movie, because the implication here seems to be that humans aren't really that big of a threat. Sure, they may hunt the animals and burn the forests, but in the end, the natural cycle goes on. In that, human intervention is just a normal part of that cycle, just like some animals hunt other animals. So in the end, the real message seems to be that the world is cruel and tragic things can take place, yes, but it's just how things are. That's how nature works, and to me, that sounds like a really unsettling message that can trigger existential dread. Because in that case, if you're concerned by humans' destruction of nature as a specific alarming issue, it then gets dismissed as just a normal part of life that is filled with suffering anyway. So one might as well just learn how to live with that. And listen, I know this may be reading way too much into things and may sound like a huge reach, but really, this interpretation isn't that far-fetched when you learn that the movie is based on a book written by someone who has been involved in hunting animals before, and also included a subtly sympathetic narrative to hunters and humans as a whole. And while that could be different from what the filmmakers intended, it still goes to show that this dark interpretation of the film is still very possible. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you like the content here. Now I've got to say goodbye and see you in another video.